Awesome. We are live, but we're just giving it a second to make sure our tech all lines up. How's it looking? You think we're live
I
everywhere?
think we're not quite live yet, but
We're
no, we
just
are.
filling the space. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're super excited to be live with some of the team at Forge. My name's Emil. I use they, them pronouns. I'm our program coordinator. And I'm super excited to be here with Christina and Michael today for the first in a 4-part series talking about pride. And today we're going to talk about what pride means to us. So we're glad you're here with us live or watching this recording not live. To get us started, we have a very, very simple question. What does pride mean to you and the communities you're connected to? So we'd love to we'll hear from each of us about our personal relationships, as well as, we know that we're in groups and communities that pride means a lot of different things too. So I'm wondering, Michael, do you want to get us started?
I can totally get us started. So, hi everybody. I'm Michael. Thanks, Emil, for being our moderator today of our questions. I use he/they pronouns. I'm Forge's executive director, and all of those other things that go with executive directorness. So, the question about what does pride mean to me and the communities that I'm connected to. When I've thought about this question, all that kept on coming to my mind was it's complicated. It's complicated. It's complicated. Because I think that for so many of us that pride is really a unique experience and it's a unique relationship. So what it means to me is it's complicated, but I also know that it means so many things to other people. I also thought when I was thinking about what does pride mean to me? I was thinking about when I was growing up, my parents used to always say that they were proud of me. And it was a good thing. It was hey, we're proud of you that you did X, Y, or Z, or we're just proud of you because of who you are. And that was really a positive thing in my life. But then when I became more of an adult, it was kind of oh, don't be prideful. Don't be full of yourself. So that relationship with pride was I'm proud of you, which was different than do I feel pride? So it's a really kind of complicated thing to look at both of those two sides. As an adult, I think about all of the identities that I have and have had, from identifying as a dyke many, 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 many years ago, to a leather person, to a genderqueer person, to a medically transitioning person, to now a multiply queer person. And I don't feel pride about any of those identities. They're just parts of who I am, as well as being a parent and a whole bunch of other things. So that's a little bit about that question, is that it's complicated. Christine, do you want to go next?
Oh, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Christina. I am a content creator here at Forge. You'll see me all over the socials. And for me, pride has meant so many different things over the years. When I was first a young adult, I had just come out of being taught for my entire childhood to be ashamed of who I was, that I was something to be ashamed of and embarrassed of. And my first experiences with pride were just overwhelming. It not quite a party, because it was the first time I was seeing myself in others, and it was just affirming. And then over the years, I was involved as a volunteer, and that meant many different things, because it was giving back to the community so that they could celebrate. But it's only been recently, just this year, that I actually went to Pride for the very first time as just a civilian, if you will, and got to spend the day both celebrating and protesting. Because for me, pride is and always has been, and even more so now, I'm noticing a protest. So it can be all of these things and none of those things to us. But yeah, that's a little bit of my relationship with pride. I hear you when you say complicated, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. And I it's interesting to hear both of you. We like didn't tell each other our answers ahead of time. Thinking about the word pride as in like proud, and as I was preparing for this, I was really like pride as in the month of June. So those are really get at different angles of this. For me, pride, I really did think about like protest and resistance and rebellion as like what feels really grounding and central to me in pride. Both we'll talk a bit more about history and culture and things like that. I think the first pride event that I remember going to was a Dyke March, which is often a more like radical presence around pride. And when I think about like what am I proud of, like it's also the ways that communities are showing up for each other and for resistance to the status quo and to harm. There's so many people who like I've seen this year really doing no pride in genocide and talking about Palestine and talking about how all of our struggles are connected, and we can't like strive for liberation of one group without recognizing harms to other groups, and often those groups also are overlapping. And so that has been something that's like felt really important to me and to communities I'm part of. And also like living in a smaller area now where there's just like not a lot of gay stuff around and visible in public, I've gotten kind of back to that connection with being like, oh, it's really nice to see like public displays of queerness, of transness, of like delight in those things. So that also feels like important to me in a way that it hasn't always felt as important, like when I've lived in bigger cities. Which kind of takes us to our next question of how has your relationship with pride changed over your life? So I'm happy, I'll maybe finish my answer on that and then pass it on. Again, I think that like pride as in like the month of June has really changed depending on where I live and what there's access to. There, like for a while living in big cities where there's a very corporate pride, I'm like, that is not for me. I don't I don't want capitalism and war and violence in my liberation. And I like last year I joined Forge at Milwaukee's Pride, and that was the first time I'd been to a big city Pride in a long time, and I was like, there's all these kids here and it's so beautiful and amazing. And that hasn't always been the case at like large city prides, that it's really like families and people of all ages are welcome and encouraged, and it's like this freeing place to just like be yourself. So I think really getting to appreciate that and see how that changes from place to place. And it feels like a time to get to, I don't know, just be like bolder and more visible and like ignore all of the stuff that's telling us to be shamed all year, even though obviously those messages still happen intensely. So I think some of that's changed, but the connection to resistance has felt really important throughout. Let's go back, different order this time. Christina, do you want to talk about how pride's changed over your life?
It has, because although it was like super healing for me in the beginning, and then for a couple of decades it became work, it's now more healing for me than ever, because viewing pride through the eyes of an elder trans person now, and seeing the magic in the young people's eyes when they can let their guard down and feel safe and loved and seen, it's probably one of the most beautiful things I see all year. Because I remember what it was like seeing that magic for the first time. And yeah, but like you said also, I've never been a huge fan of corporate pride at these events. And what I noticed this year, which again, very healing for me, was that people were actually pushing back against the financial institutions and stuff, the predatory lenders, they were getting booed, and I was like, yes, Pride is becoming a protest again. And the me of 10 years ago probably would have been quite annoyed because I was a peacekeeper. I didn't want to, be loud. I wanted to show up, do my job, get paid, and go home. So it was nice to see that as I am getting bolder and louder in my old age, so many of my fellow Gen Xers and such are doing the exact same. I saw so many elders speaking out this past weekend at Pride. And yeah, it was quite a thing to see. It was gorgeous. What about you, Michael?
Christina, every time you mention elder in relation to you, I kind of wanted to, I have the little titters of like, I am like quite a bit older than you, so I'm like, oh, you're not an elder, but you are. So like you identify however you want to identify, but every time you say it, I kind of chuckle, in a good way, in a loving way.
Yeah.
So, but we all are. I mean, like, because we've been around, all three of us have been around for a while. And so we're all elders to some of the younger folks that are coming up. And like Emil said, like, last year when we were all together at Pride here in Milwaukee, there were kids of like little teeny kids and big kids. But back to the question of what has our relationship been with Pride and how has that changed? So I'm going to do the elder comment of, I've been out for over 40 years, and I really, really remember when some of the initial gatherings were so intimate. There wasn't like 6 degrees of separation. There was like 2 degrees of separation. Like everybody knew everybody, or everybody knew somebody who knew somebody that knew you. And that intimacy was something that it was really cherished, and I really loved that because it did feel kind of family-like. It felt like people that cared about each other. Even if you didn't really, really, really know them, you saw them and you were in community together. And I think that, as things have become bigger and more formal and more corporate and more kind of festival-like, where people are spending lots of money on like making things look big rather than the intimacy of it, it's lost a lot of charm for me, just because I really enjoyed that intimacy. And so Christina, like you, I've worked Pride every year basically. So every year that I've gone to Pride, I've been working. So a lot of times that's meant I haven't gotten to walk around and see other vendors or be part of the event. I think the other thing that's really coming to mind for me is that some of the events, like Emil mentioned, that Milwaukee's Pride is huge. It's really big. It's a really large scale event. And I've certainly been to other Pride gatherings, but the big events are really overstimulating to me. Like, it's a great time when people want to be out, people want to be loud, people want to be big. Like, that's super for them. But it's hard for me and my sensory system to have that be around me. I also wanted to comment a little bit on the protest piece, if I can, which takes us off our schedule a little bit, but it goes with that sensory piece for me. So I heard both of you talk about kind of the positiveness about the politicalness, the fighting back, the pushing back, the not, no pride without, and kind of leveling that playing field. And for me, as somebody who's a trauma survivor, sometimes protests feel really scary. So, that's not my way of engaging with people. And I know that everybody can respond the way they respond. And it's all good. But I guess I just want to put it out there that I recognize that, at least for me, and I know it's true for other folks, that loud protesting can feel really daunting and make some of us want to retreat from those public spaces. So yes, good, but yes, hard for some people.
That's relatable, for sure. But that's also one of the, excuse my cat, she loves to walk in front of me. No, that's one of the reasons why I'm also looking forward to attending some of the small town pride festivals around me this year, because I live in a very small town in the middle of nowhere, and there are probably 10 small towns having their first or second pride festivals around me. And it's going to be the local vendors, the small town people. And that honestly, that's much more my vibe.
That's great. And Michael and Christina, I think you both set us up well for like plugging what's going to happen next week. So on Tuesday, the 18th, our theme is getting the most out of pride. And part of that is
We might have had an Emil freeze.
I think we had an Emil freeze.
Oh, Christina, we're gonna fill space until Emil which hopefully will be soon. So I know Emil was going to talk a little bit about what's coming up next before we move to our last question. So the next one in our series is Chris, remind me, it's getting the most out of pride.
Getting the most out of pride.
Yeah. And as we're still, yep, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I think super fun topic for next week.
It will be. And we're just going to give Emil a second to come back. And this is one of the joys of having a live event, is that sometimes stuff happens. Chris, why don't we go back and talk a little bit about some of those concepts around protest and feeling more comfortable. Like, I mean, you said kind of that you feel more comfortable now being in that space versus where you used to be.
I do. And I think, you mentioned as a trauma survivor how sometimes that's hard. And for a very long time, it was hard for me. But I think after so many years of feeling like I didn't have a voice or the courage to speak up, sometimes it's healing for me to let out all of the things I wasn't able to say over the years of being brought up in a hostile environment and, living in a hostile environment.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't always feel safe to protest. I don't always feel confident enough to protest. Sometimes my triggers are just too much and I can't, so I step away and take care of me. I think it's important for us to realize what we are capable of doing and when, and respecting that in ourselves. Yeah. Because we don't want to cause ourselves harm when we're trying to do good.
Right. And it's important to have a voice and share that voice when it does feel safe. So it's kind of that balancing act of, when does it feel safe for us? Is this a safe environment? What do I feel about issues that are going on in our current world, or trends and things? So it's a really exciting thing to be able to kind of gauge that and know where you feel and how you feel and all of that. Our hair always bothers us. Got to get the clothes right. I am suggesting we've been live for a few minutes and had a really good conversation. I'm going to suggest that we take a pause right now. And for people that are listening, we're going to come back in a couple of minutes. And hopefully Emil's internet or whatever's going on will be back and up. And we will start another live in a few minutes, however long that few minutes is. So thanks everybody for joining us, and hopefully you will come back and we'll listen and engage a little bit more in a few minutes. Thanks everybody.